Hi everybody, welcome to the reading of the third chapter of Tao Te Ching, a mysterious Lao Tzu. And here is my co-host Cordelh.
Hello. Hope you're all having a good day.
Thank you. So, high five. Yeah. Okay. And let's start by just reading them. The translation by H. MacDonald. If you overly esteem talented individuals, people will become overly competitive. If you overvalue possessions, people will begin to steal. Don't display your treasures, or people will become envious. The master leads by emptying people's minds, filling their bellies, weakening their ambitions, and making them become strong. Preferring simplicity and freedom from desires, avoiding the pitfalls of knowledge and wrong action, for those who practice not doing, everything will fall into place. I feel like the entire chapter talks about not having an ambition and not wanting to display all you have.
If you love accumulation, gain, and increase every day, thieves and robbers will be waiting just to take it all away. Best to be so empty-headed that it seems you lost it all. You will know you're on the way, though others say you had a stall. This was the translation of Jim Gradfelder.
Thank you. I'm actually like his translation more. So, the first part. If you overly esteem talented individuals, people will become overly competitive.
It is a good attempt to translate that basically if you put a number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, people will compete to be the second or the first or whatever. But the part that I find, well, it's subjective, but talented individuals. The thing is, it's not a question of talented individuals, it's a question of individuals that have the opportunity to become overly competitive. So for example, I would imagine that way back when this was written, the talented individuals, as he mentions it, would have been writers and scribes and stuff like that, perhaps men of power, people that actually had access to good food, good knowledge, good security, good roof, good life. So we shouldn't think about talented individuals as, Elon Musk, for example, but rather as that guy that was born in a position of power and who didn't really fought for it. He was just born in a position of power. So if we put all of the people that are talented, like it's put in there, and then we put them to compete, well, they will compete. There will be people fighting all the time. This is very theological in a sense, because even when you look into Catholicism and they say the first will be the last and the last will be the first is basically again, or to come back to the concept of not compete with each other. And the same goes, for your example, for other concepts,
From my perspective, I think it talks about practicing the art itself and enjoying perfection in the art with the capacity you have according to your own talents, rather than looking at others and trying to outcompete others, then practicing the art of doing something loses its meaning because you do it to impress others instead of perfectioning it for yourself. Let's say it's the talented individuals are actually singers. And the other person who's a singer and sings in a certain way, like characteristic to that person, would try to compete in singing the way the other person sings and try to outcompete that person rather than reaching for their own voice. Just because the crowd valued the other person.
Yeah, I understand that concept too. It's better not to compete with others, but we compete with oneself. Although I would argue that a certain level of competitiveness is important from my perspective, because the word competitiveness perhaps is misused in my mouth. What I mean is, that moment when you're a kid and you watch a parent do something and you want to do the same thing, but you're not yet capable of doing it because you're a kid. At that point starts the competitiveness. That's what I mean by competitiveness. Okay, I want to do that because he knows how to do it. That's an interesting movement. Now, if the movement is, I want to be number one, not because I find it interesting, but just because I want to be number one, then that's the wrong movement. That's what I would understand in there.
That's why they use overvalue. If you overvalue the talented ones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I find the talented individuals kind of misused.
Well, if
I like the gifted.
The gifted.
In the first one they used the gifted.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one because the gifted literally means, the person that was given whatever,
Okay. If you overvalue possessions, people will begin to steal. Aren't people stealing to not because somebody else overvalues something, but because they're hungry? Why would people steal at all? Like, the question is, why steal?
You're right. People steal because they're hungry. But how is the person that has the food? He overvalues his food, which leads to the price being too high for the population, which leads to people stealing. It's not the reason why people do steal. It's why do people overvalue what they have. If you overvalue possession, people will begin to steal. So, for example, if I wrote a poem and I overvalued it, the only way for people to have access to it would be to steal it. It makes sense, It's not an insulting logic. Like, most people would read that and figure, oh, if people are rich, the poor will steal. But it's not that. It's actually a cause and effect kind of case, Hoard too much and others won't have access to it, which means that they will start to steal.
Yeah, that ties up to the next line. Do not display your treasures because people will become envious. Would they steal because they're envious of the things you will display?
I have a very hard story that I will not tell completely, but one of my friends went to Colombia from here, Western Europe, just as a European in one of the favelas where originally he was born in, and it went very badly. So I think this comes back to most saying, it's not a question about displaying your treasure, it's a question of when in Rome, act like Romans. Because if you show difference, if you show that you have more than your neighbor, if you have something that nobody else has, people will look at it. The truth is that ultimately, things that nobody have, nobody should have them. That's the truth. It's hard to understand it because most people want things that nobody has, but it's better not to, that those things remain unowned. It's actually the very reason we have museums, so everybody can watch art without it being owned by one individual that self-claims himself owner of something. And instead, what we do is we protect it with museums, which means that we have whole organizations of people taking care of this one piece of art that then can be shared to thousands and thousands of people. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. The next line, I actually grappled with it. The master leads by emptying people's minds, filling their bellies, weakening their ambitions, and making them become strong. That's the translation by H. MacDonald. I would compare it to the translation by Stephen Mitchell. The master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, weakening their ambition, and toughening their resolve. So, does the entire paragraph mean that having ambition is wrong and getting rid of the ambition is what the master should do?
What you have to understand is Taoism is the Eastern version of Stoicism in the Western civilization. So, in the Western civilization, we had people like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, who were extremely opposite. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of the known world, and Epictetus was a slave in the Greek antiquity. And both of them say the same thing. And it looks very harsh at first. From a king, it looks like he's humble. Oh yeah, a king doesn't have to display his stuff because there is no point in displaying all that stuff if I have so much power. I need to be humbled so I can focus on what needs to be done for everybody, which is a great concept. Now for a slave, when a slave says ownership, it doesn't matter. Ambition, it doesn't matter. Wanting to be free, it doesn't matter. It sounds much harsher, but at the same time, from his perspective, it leads to a much easier life, because then a person can endure the hardship without having false dreams, false hopes, and stuff that will not happen. And that is what he's pointing out here, that somehow people have their place, and he takes the perspective of the master, which is interesting, but it avoids the concept of the master being in its place and the servant in its place and stuff like that. It's the acceptance of where we are that really matters in this line. Not so much, like, who deserves to be where, but, okay, I'm here, what can I do with the cards I'm dealt
with?
Instead of dreaming of having the cards of somebody else, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you for that input. I understood it in a way that the sage or the master, because like it's loosely translated, would first empty people's minds or hearts, like in one of those translations, of the things that people learned before, and fill their stomachs so that people would not have this desire to feed themselves. Because the desire to feed themselves actually is so strong that it's a priority number one. Like, if people are well fed, and all the pre-learned knowledge, which might be just social norms that are imposed on people, would be emptied, people would start to develop who they really are. People would start blooming, let's say. If they don't have to eat, look, search or hunt for food, and if they would not follow the pre-learned, socially determined norms. So that's how I understand that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's a good interpretation.
The master, yes. So the master, in order to he strengthens, he toughens their core, and by core, Stephen Mitchell probably meant the inner talents of people. Like, everybody will become themselves rather than hunting for the social approval or hunting for being fed.
It is a pretty good interpretation. I like it. Yeah. Makes sense to me.
Okay, so the next line. Preferring simplicity and freedom from desires, avoiding the pitfalls of knowledge and rune action.
Yeah.
Preferring simplicity and freedom from desires, avoiding the pitfalls of knowledge and rune action. Thus he talks again about social norms and this kind of inert state of being, where a person just accepts everything without judgment. I feel I feel like I don't get it completely.
Well, without desire, one can avoid the pitfall of knowledge and wrong action. And I would tie this to, again, theology. I'm sorry, but I come back to theology, in the sense that, well, actually, even in jurisprudence, there is that concept too. If you are not aware that you're committing a sin or crime, it is not sinful to do it. It's a very basic concept that happened very early in the theology because, for example, well, back in the days, they had to find little turnaround to make impose a religion in other cultures. But the concept is, if you have not been made aware that something, is criminal, then you shouldn't be punished for it. This is interesting in a sense, because to me it points out to the innocence. If you don't know that horrible people do horrible things, then you won't feel the need to fight that horrible things that happen, or those horrible things that happen. And the key word in there is fight, because the act of fighting is the wrong action. It leads to more demise, more of that cycle of fighting and fighting and fighting. I think it's interesting, but it's complicated, because in one perspective one has to be careful of what one learns. After all, the more we do something, the more we grow accustomed to do it, so it's better not to hurt people over and over and over, or otherwise we could end up growing accustomed to hurting them. But at the same time, I would argue that knowledge is really important, because it is with knowledge that we can be aware that there is a problem and that we can have to solve it. Now, the big issue is that it comes back with the first line. Once we are aware of a problem, what is our first instinct? Is it to be humble and try to find a peaceful solution that kind of is like, I'm not gonna become this glorious hero, but I'm actually gonna try to find a solution for a problem, like being humble without being competitive? Or am I going to actually do the wrong action and do exactly what other people do wrong? That is what I understand. But I might be wrong.
You're not wrong, actually. Tao is written in a precise way so that people can interpret it in the way that is closest to their life experiences. You're definitely not wrong about it. And the final paragraph is, for those who practice non-doing, everything will fall into place. Does it talk about accepting everything that comes rather than forcing it?
No. Mm-hmm. It talks about this concept of doing, not doing, which is basically, instead of actively trying to do something that, instead of forcing an action, one has to just do that action like they were breathing in and breathing out. I am not breathing in and breathing out consciously. It's just coming in and out. But now if I try to force my breath, eventually I will get lightheaded and I might actually even collapse. But if I don't think about doing it, if I just do it, then it comes naturally. And it's just like I can spend a lifetime breathing. Now if I force it, that's what I understand from it, at least. So by practicing not doing something, by practicing the just intuitive part of ourselves, then everything comes into place. Because the truth is, even in psychology, for example, I remember this book that talks about fear. It's called The Gift of Fear.
Yeah.
And it talks about the intuition, that our inner self can feel when something is wrong. And that's why we, for example, get a little shiver in the back when we feel around us that something is not going right. The same goes for the other way. I mean, when something is right, even if everybody tells us that it is wrong, we feel that it is right, then we know.
When he writes, if you practice non-doing, it reminds me of a meme that was somewhere on Facebook, that I woke up, I saw an extremely inflammatory comment, and then I practiced not responding of it in order to reach my Zen. I'm not responding to it. I'm not responding to that. So when he writes practice non-doing, is actually also kind of makes it funny for me, because it sounds like practice not responding to somebody doing something wrong in front, or not even wrong, but something that would agitate you otherwise. Practice not responding to that. Practice like letting it go.
But think about it.
Yeah.
In some way, responding to anger with anger is also forcing something.
Yeah.
It is not soft, it is not gentle, it is actually forceful. Even if it's not specifically, like forcing, like what we understand completely, it is a forceful thing. You have to spend time into an answer, you are thinking about it, you're waiting for the answer, to answer back, ready for it. All of those actions are forceful. They're not intuitive, gentle, soft, like gliding.
Yeah. Cordelh, thank you for your input. As always, you are an educator and a teacher. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really fun. Hope,
At 5?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, guys. Please check out Minder Poet Society on Discord. All the links are provided below. And just subscribe also to Cordelh's YouTube channel. And yeah, thank you for being us, and see you.
Don't forget to put a follow to Nodrik down there and a little like if you enjoyed the video.
I will be really grateful. And yeah, this podcast on reading Tao Te Ching was sponsored by our free time. So thank you to all, and see you all in the next chapter of Tao Te Ching.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah. And good morning, good night, and whatever time of the day you have a great rest of the day. Bye.